was the summer when my best friend, Alex, and I decided to take a spontaneous trip to the beach. We had been feeling the weight of our responsibilities, and the idea of lounging in the sun, swimming in the cool water, and letting our worries melt away was too tempting to resist. We chose a lesser-known beach about 2 hours away from home, a secluded spot rumored to have the clearest water and softest sand, when my best friend, Alex, and I decided to take a spontaneous trip to the beach. The drive was filled with laughter and music, the excitement of a carefree weekend ahead fueling our spirits. As we arrived, I felt a wave of calm wash over me. The beach was stunning golden sand stretching for miles, bordered by lush green cliffs that seemed to cradle the coastline. There were only a handful of other visitors, and the soft sound of waves crashing against the shore created a serene atmosphere. We quickly set up our area near some rocks, enjoying the sun's warmth on our skin. The first few hours flew by as we swam, played beach volleyball, and soaked in the sun. As the day wore on, I noticed something odd. The few people who were once scattered along the beach seemed to have disappeared. When I looked around, I realized we were practically alone, with only the fading sunlight and the whispers of the ocean surrounding us. It wasn't long before the peaceful sounds of the beach were interrupted by the distant echo of laughter. At first, we thought nothing of it, assuming it was just another group of beachgoers arriving late in the day. But as the laughter grew louder, I noticed it was unsettling, almost mocking. It originated from an area further down the beach, obscured by the cliffs, and it sent an involuntary chill down my spine. Alex offered to see what was going on in there, his curiosity piqued. I hesitated, a knot forming in my stomach. Something about the sounds felt wrong, but I didn't want to seem scared. So I shrugged off the feeling and agreed to investigate. We walked toward the source of the laughter, our steps crunching on the sand. As we approached, the laughter abruptly stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. I exchanged a glance with Alex, who seemed to share my unease. Nonetheless, we pressed on, fueled by curiosity. The area we reached was rocky and secluded, with tall cliffs towering above us. The laughter had come from a small group of people gathered around a bonfire, but as we stepped closer, it was evident something was off. The group was older people in their late 20s to early 30s huddled around the flickering flames, their faces illuminated in dancing shadows. They dressed in dark, ragged clothing, a stark contrast to the beach vibe I had expected. I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me. The group's smiles were wide, but their eyes were cold, devoid of warmth. They turned toward us slowly as we approached, their gazes piercing. One of them greeted us and beckoned us to join him, an unsettling grin spreading across his face. His voice was jarring against the quiet that surrounded us, as if his words held a hidden malice. It felt like an invitation laced with something sinister. I replied that we were just exploring and didn't want to intrude, trying to keep my voice steady. Turning to Alex, I saw he was equally uncomfortable, his unease mirroring my own. The group exchanged glances, and for a brief moment, I thought I spotted a flicker of irritation in their eyes before the smiles returned. They said no problem, we'll just have a little fun, and again offered to resegregate. They motioned toward the fire, the flames casting eerie shadows that danced on the jagged rocks behind them. As much as curiosity had driven us here, instinct kicked in. There was an unsettling vibe emanating from the group, and I felt an overwhelming compulsion to leave. I said we should get back, trying to make my exit clear. The man began to coax us to stay for a moment and suggested we listen to some fun stories in the night by the campfire. With my heart racing, I turned to Alex and said, "Let's go." I felt a surge of adrenaline pushing me to leave, and he nodded in agreement without a word. We turned away, the laughter from the group following us like an echo through the night. As we walked back along the beach, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if their eyes were boring into our backs, their laughter still echoing in my ears, now twisted and mocking. Once we were out of sight, I picked up my pace, nearly sprinting back to our spot on the sand. We reached our setup, and I took a deep breath, the cool air from the ocean calming my racing heart. Once we were settled back at our towels, Alex said in a low voice that it was strange, and he had a bad feeling about it. I nodded in agreement. As darkness fell and we settled in for the night, I became acutely aware of the sounds around us, the crash of the waves, the whispers of the wind, and the occasional shift in the sand. It was beautiful but also isolating. We decided to light our small portable fire pit, and the warmth from the flames brought comfort. The hours crawled by as we talked about everything and nothing. But then, out of nowhere, I heard the laughter again. This time it was closer, almost as if it floated on the night air. My blood ran cold, and I shared a horrified look with Alex. We both knew that the laughter did not belong to us. It sounded laced with enjoyment, a mocking reminiscence of the group we had just encountered. The sound came again, followed by shuffling noises that grew ever closer. There was no mistaking it, they were back. Panic set in as we grabbed our things, ready to leave the beach behind. As we scrambled to pack up our belongings, I didn't dare look toward the cliffs, but I could feel their presence, a heavy weight in the air. Just as we were about to bolt, I caught a glimpse of their silhouettes emerging from the shadows. I felt paralyzed, though every instinct screamed for us to run. With everything in our arms, we took off toward the parking lot, adrenaline pushing us faster than I thought possible. I felt the sand shift beneath my feet, but I didn't dare look back again. The memory of their laughter echoed in my mind as we dashed past the twisted ropes of driftwood. Once we reached the car, I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking. With a twist, the door finally opened, and we jumped inside, locking the doors behind us as we breathed heavily. The beach, which had been a paradise just hours earlier, now felt like a trap, a place where danger lurked unseen. That day, the weather was perfect. The sun shone brightly, casting glistening reflections on the water, and I couldn't wait to spend my weekend soaking up the sun and enjoying the sea. I arrived early in the morning, hoping to claim the best spot on the sand. The beach was relatively empty, just a few families setting up their umbrellas and children building sandcastles. I set up my towel, applied sunscreen, and waded into the water. It was refreshing, the coolness contrasting perfectly with the heat of the sun. As the morning progressed, more people arrived, but it still felt inviting and open. After a few hours of swimming and relaxing, I decided to take a walk along the shore, searching for seashells. The tide was low, exposing a wide stretch of wet sand. As I wandered, I noticed something unusual in the distance. It was a small, dark object partially buried in the sand. Curiosity got the better of me, and I made my way towards it. As I got closer, I realized it was a backpack. It looked old and worn, tossed aside carelessly. I glanced around, but no one seemed to be paying attention to it, and I felt a strange pull to see what was inside. I hesitated at first. It felt wrong to rummage through someone else's belongings. But as I unzipped the backpack, my heart raced. What did I expect to find? Inside, there were some clothes that smelled damp and salty, a half-empty water bottle, and a notebook. The pages were filled with what looked like a travel journal, detailing adventures across different beaches and scenic views. I flipped through it, feeling a mix of intrigue and discomfort, but then I came across a page that sent chills down my spine. It detailed a local legend about swimmers who had gone missing in this very area, tales of something lurking beneath the waves, watching from the depths. I quickly zipped the bag up, feeling like I shouldn't have broken that seal. I looked around again, hoping to see someone who might belong to the backpack, but there was still no one close by. I felt the weight of the decision pressing on me. Should I just leave the bag there? Or should I take it to the lifeguard and see if anyone reported it missing? Inner conflict raged, and I eventually decided it was better to be safe than sorry. I picked up the backpack and headed back toward the lifeguard station. When I reached the lifeguard station, there was a young lifeguard on duty. I presented the backpack, explaining where I found it. He took a glance and grimaced slightly, admitting he had seen it earlier but hadn't thought anything of it. He told me he would notify the beach patrol and suggested I stick around in case anyone came looking for it. I stepped aside, trying to brush off the growing anxiety that settled in my gut. Maybe I was overreacting. I reached for my phone to distract myself, scrolling aimlessly through social media while glancing back at the water. That's when I noticed a small group of people swimming farther out. They seemed to be enjoying themselves, but something about their movements appeared unusual, almost frantic. Suddenly, a shrill whistle pierced the air. It was the lifeguard who had jumped from his post and was waving his arms frantically at the swimmers. My heart dropped. My instinct screamed at me that something was wrong. The lifeguard sprinted toward the water, and I could see him calling to two other lifeguards who joined him. Time seemed to slow down as I watched the scene unfold. Panic spread among the beachgoers as they began to realize something serious was happening. Just as they reached the swimmers, I heard frantic shouts floating through the air. People began to gather at the water's edge, a feeling of dread hanging thick in the atmosphere. Shortly, a few lifeguards emerged from the water, two of them pulling someone along as they swam towards the shore. It was a young woman, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. They reached the beach. I stood frozen, watching as the lifeguards began to perform CPR right there on the sand. The scene oddly surreal amid the cheerful beachgoers just moments before. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see her lips moving, panic etched into her features. After what felt like an eternity, they finally managed to get her breathing again, and paramedics were called to take her to the hospital. The lifeguard who remained at the scene looked shaken himself, glancing back toward the water now filled with people who had suddenly lost their joy and were full of fear instead. I saw him mutter something to the others, and my heart raced as something nagged at the back of my mind. That's when I heard a low, rumbling growl. The sound felt out of place, coming from the depths of the ocean. I dismissed it, thinking my imagination was running wild again, but I felt the heaviness in the air, a palpable tension. No one seemed to mention anything about the journal from the backpack or the girl being pulled from the sea, and that unsettled me even more. You would think such an incident would spark some chatter, but it felt like everyone was pretending as if nothing had happened. As I walked back along the beach, I stole a glance at the water one last time. It looked calm and inviting, yet I couldn't ignore the sense that something was lurking beneath that surface, waiting.